Assalamu alaikum class and a very good morning. How are you all? I hope all of you are doing well by the grace of Almighty Allah. Alhamdulillah, Miss is also doing fine. Class, are you doing your most important thing in your life? You must be wondering, what is that most important thing that Miss is asking about? Well, I'm talking about studying. Are you doing that? If yes, then excellent, keep up the good work. Students, today in our class, we'll be learning something new and fun. But before starting our class, I want to introduce myself to you. I am your BGST teacher and I am Khadusna Fariha from Sector 4 branch, Uttara Milestone School and College. With this introduction, let's start our class now.
So students, welcome to my class. Open your CW copy and book in front of you right away before starting the class and write the CW number on your copy 39, as today our CW number is 39. And also don't forget to write today's date as well. Today we are going to have our class on chapter 4, that is Introduction to Population of Bangladesh. In our today's class, we will be discussing a new lesson from this chapter. While we are ready to do our class, let's know the objectives of today's class first. After finishing our today's class, all of the students will be able to have a clear idea about the discussed topic of today. You all will be able to discuss the topic even more clearly than before. Even you will be able to answer any one-word question related to today's topic, and last but not the least, you will be able to answer any questions related to this topic.
But before starting the class, I want to ask you some quick questions to check whether you have remembered what we have learned in our previous class. Can you tell me what is birth rate? Very good. Then according to climate, which countries are more proficient of breeding children? You are right. Very good. Then, does high literacy result in low birth rate? What do you think? Yes or no? Very good. Then, what is polygamy? You are right. Very good. Then, does infant mortality result in high birth rate? Brilliant. I can see you have done a very good job with your study. Please keep up the good work. Now let's match your answers with mine. We have learned about birth rate, that number of babies born in every 1,000 people, right? Then about the second questions, according to climate, tropical countries are more proficient of breeding children. That's why the answer will be tropical countries. Then, does high literacy result in low birth rate? Of course it does. High literacy results in low birth rate. Then, about the polygamy. When a man marries more than one woman, in that case, it is known as polygamy. It can be done in other ways as well, like a woman will be married with more than one man. But that practice is not so available or common in our society. Then, does infant mortality results in high birth rate? The answer is yes, it does.
But before starting the class, let's watch a short video first. And you people try to guess that on which lesson we are going to have our class today.
me, what do you see? Yes, we can see here a world map that is colored with some shades of brown, where the lighter shades of brown is representing the lower mortality rate of the country and darker shades of brown is representing higher mortality rate of the countries. But I'm sure now you're wondering that why there are so many differences in color around the world. That is showing the differences in mortality rate around the world, right? Now, can you guess that what are we going to discuss in our today's class? Yes, your guess is right. In our today's class, we are going to discuss the lesson 7 from your chapter 4 that talks about causes and effects of discrepancy in mortality rate. Now, let's know what we will be learning in our today's class. In our today's class, we are going to start with learning the concept of mortality rate. Then we will be learning what are the causes of discrepancy in mortality rate and then again what are the impacts of discrepancy in mortality rate. So, starting with the concept of mortality rate, first we have to know about death. We know the end of a life is called death and number of people's death of a certain age in per thousand people is called mortality rate. Mortality rate can also be called as death rate. I'm saying again, number of people's death of a certain age in per thousand people is called mortality rate. Per thousand, it is the unit of measuring mortality rate. That's why we are saying that mortality rate is measured in per thousand and the unit of calculating mortality rate here is thousand or per thousand. Both are same. Now we will know the causes of discrepancy in mortality rate. There are many causes that we will learn about the discrepancy in mortality rate. And the first cause is geographical location. Geographical location is one of the causes that make discrepancy or differences in mortality rate around the world. Mortality rate is low where infrastructure, communication and transportation are developed. Generally, developed countries has this kind of facilities where they have good infrastructure, good communication and good transportation. And that's why they have lower mortality rate than the developing countries or underdeveloped countries where we do not have good infrastructure, good communication or transportation system like the developed countries. Then, extreme weather condition can also increases the mortality rate. Like in the cold countries, the mortality rate will automatically be higher than the tropical countries. Then, natural disasters and accidents is another cause that can make discrepancy or differences in mortality rate. Mortality rate is higher when natural calamities take place frequently, like cyclone, cedar, tsunami, storm, floods, etc. Apart from these natural disasters, accidents are another reason that can create discrepancy in mortality rate. Accidents caused from faulty communication, lack of safety in construction sites also create differences in mortality rate. Virus and diseases can be another cause that can create mortality discrepancy around the world. Mortality rate is high where diseases like cholera, typhoid, asthma and various viral diseases like Zika virus, Ebola virus, Marburg virus and so on break out in an epidemic form. We all know the world is now suffering from coronavirus pandemic. Even in this modern world, we can see sharply that how the mortality rate differences around the world in some countries. Countries like Bangladesh, where the mortality rate is increasing day by day for coronavirus, on the other side, Country like New Zealand, they have already announced that they have zero patients from coronavirus. Thus, they have stopped the mortality rate that is from coronavirus. Now, why is this happening? Lack of vaccines and less developed medical care is responsible for these death discrepancies in this time. Age is another reason that creates discrepancy in mortality rate. Places or countries where minor children and elderly people are more in number, they have higher mortality rate than the countries where minor children and elderly people are less in number. Poverty is one of the most important causes that can create mortality rate differences around the world. Poor people cannot afford nutritious food, so they lack in proper nutrition. And most of the time, they suffer from various kinds of diseases. And for treating themselves these kind of diseases, they cannot afford proper health care also. As they live very low standard of life, where they become sick easily and also unable to afford proper health care, most of the time leads them to death. Underdeveloped country has higher mortality rate for the poverty. In developed country, poverty is not very acute, but in underdeveloped country and sometimes in developing country, mortality rate becomes higher for this poverty. Wars and battles is another reason that can cause mortality rate discrepancies around the world. Mortality rate is higher where wars and battles take place, like countries in Middle East, Africa, and some Southeast Asia. Even in this time, in these countries like Middle East, Africa, and some South Asian countries, people are dying for wars and battles most often time. That is why the mortality rate for wars and battles in these countries are higher than other countries. Till now, we have learned the causes that can create mortality rate discrepancy around the world. But now we will learn impacts of discrepancy in mortality rate. First of all, discrepancy in mortality rate changes in population. That means countries with higher mortality rate leads to less population. On the other side, countries where mortality rate is low, there we will find more population in number. Then, infant mortality and accident-related death can cause huge loss to countries' economy and social life. Infant mortality means child mortality. Child mortality and accident-related death is not good for a country's development, as this is the loss of manpower. We need human beings for the labor and for the development of our country. So, if we lose our people like this, then who is going to help to develop the country, right? Then again, in a country, highest infant mortality rate can be a major obstacle to population control. Now, the question is, why highest infant mortality rate is a major obstacle to population control? Highest infant mortality rate inspires parents to take more children. Parents become anxious and tensed about their future if they lose their children. As in a country like ours, parents take babies so they can be taken care of by their children in their future. This high tension regarding their future often increases the mortality rate. Now we will be learning the impacts of discrepancy in mortality rate on a family. Death of an earning person in a family creates uncertainty in life. Now you may think that why low mortality rate is necessary and why it is important. Low mortality rate is helping our country to develop our country's structure, and it is also contributing to our socio-economic development. Thus, and that is why low mortality rate is very important for our country's development. Now we have a good news. In our country, even though we had much infant mortality rate in past, but now the infant mortality rate has been decreased. So the infant mortality rate is now low in our country, and that is the good news.
Now that we have already finished the lesson 7, let's check on some MCQs from this lesson. The first question is, if climate is extreme for a country, then the options are given like that. A. Its birth rate will be higher. B. Its mortality rate will be higher. C. Its mortality rate will be lower. And D. Birth rate and mortality rate will have no impact. Well, the answer to this question will be B. Its mortality rate will be higher, as we have already read that if climate is extreme for a country, it increases the rate of mortality. Now, the question number 2. The question number 2 is, which is not the reason for mortality rate discrepancy? The options are given like that: lack of education, poverty, wars and battle, and age. Here, A will be the correct answer, that is, lack of education, because this is the reason for birth rate discrepancy. The other options that are given, like poverty, wars and battle, and age, they are the reason for mortality rate discrepancy, but lack of education is not. The question number 3 is, what is tornado? You might be thinking it is a funny question, right? But can you answer me that what is tornado? Is it a virus or a disease? Or is it a natural disaster? Or none of the above is correct? I know you already know the answer, that tornado is natural disaster. Now try to answer question number 4. The question 4 goes like that: lack of safety in constructional work can lead to A. Death from natural disaster, B. Accidental death, C. Death in wars and battle, and D. None of the above is correct. So, what do you think is the correct answer? Here, the correct answer will be option B, that is accidental death. As we have learned from the lesson 7, that is, lack of safety in constructional work can lead to accidental death. Now, the question number 5 is, what is Zika? Answer will be, it is a virus. The other options are here given like that: it is a country's capital, natural disaster, or bacteria. None of them will be the correct answer, because we know Zika is a virus. Question number 6 is a multiple choice question. The question here is, mortality rate increases where 1. Minors are more in number, 2. Adults are more in number, 3. Elderly people, that means old people, are more in number. Which one is true, or which one is correct that you think? Option A is 1 and 2. Option B is 1 and 3. Option C is 2 and 3. And option D is all of them, that means 1, 2 and 3. Here the correct answer will be 1 and 3, that is option B, because we know that it is about age. So according to the age, in a society where minors and elderly people are more in number, their mortality rate increases. Following the question number 6, question number 7 is also a multiple choice question. Here the question is, what the poor cannot afford? To eat nutritious food, that is option 1. Then they cannot afford advanced healthcare. And then there is option 3. They cannot afford proper education. So according to this option, which one is true or which one is correct? The fourth options here are A. 1 and 2, B. 1 and 3, C. 2 and 3, and D. 1, 2 and 3. The answer will be D. 1, 2 and 3, because we know that the poor cannot afford neither of them. Here you can see mortality rate, where the question is where mortality rate is higher. The options are given like that. Option A, in developed country. Option B, developing country. C. Underdeveloped country, and D. All the above. Well, for the answer to this question, it will be C. Underdeveloped country, because we know that according to the developed country and developing country, in underdeveloped country, mortality rate is higher. Question number 9 is, worsen battle increases birth rate, increases mortality rate, has no impact on birth rate or mortality rate, and D, A and B both will be the correct answer. Here, the correct answer will be worsen battle increases mortality rate. Following the worsen battles, here you can see the question number 10 on it. That is, at present, where war is going on. As it is a multiple choice question, that is why you are having 3 choices first, and the choices are in Middle East countries, 2, some Southeast Asian countries, and 3, Africa. Now you have to find out which one is correct. The 4 options are given like that: A, 1 and 2, B, 1 and 3, C, 2 and 3, and D, 1, 2, and 3. The answer will be here D, 1, 2, and 3. As we have already learned that Middle East countries, some Southeast Asian countries, and in Africa, in all of these options, at present, war is going on.
So this is about our today's lesson. Now time for your RQs. These are the RQs we can see from our today's lesson. Here you can see 5 RQs are given. First of all, what is mortality rate and what is the unit of calculating mortality rate? Then, how can poverty make differences in mortality rate around the world? Then, why is the highest infant mortality rate a major problem to control population in a country? Then, describe some of the causes of discrepancy in mortality rate. And then, describe the impacts of discrepancy in mortality rate. Now I will be answering the RQ's answer so that you will find it easier to learn. The first answer of first RQ, here you have to give the definition of mortality rate. I assume that you haven't forgotten what we have learned about the concept of mortality rate. Number of people dead of a certain age per 1,000 is known as mortality rate. So, whenever we are going to calculate mortality rate, the unit of mortality rate calculation will always be 1000, or you can also write per 1000. Both are same. Then about the answers of second question, how can poverty make differences in mortality rate around the world described? We have learned it under causes of discrepancy in mortality rate already. Poor people for their low standard of life often die. Thus, underdeveloped countries have more mortality rate due to poverty than developed countries. We have learned that poor people, they do not have a good standard of life and they do not have the ability to afford treatment or medical care, and that's why these things always lead them to death, and that is why in underdeveloped country we have more mortality rate than in developed country. Then, why is the highest infant mortality rate a major problem to control population in a country? We have already discussed about it as well. We have seen that how the parents become so conscious or so tense about the future if they lose their child more often. That always inspires them to take more children, and that is how the infant mortality always leads to higher population. And it also becomes a problem to control population in a country, as if the parents started to take more children, the population of country will be increasing day by day and it will be out of control. Now, describe some of the causes of discrepancy in mortality rate. We have learned the causes like geographical location, virus and diseases, wars and battles, etc. These are some of the causes we have learned. You have to mention the causes and then have to describe the causes for writing the answer. Then describe the impacts of discrepancy in mortality rate. Here you have to write the impacts and you have to describe the impacts as well. So, time for taking feedback to check whether you have understood the class properly or not. I want to ask you 5 quick questions. Let me check whether you have understood my class or not. Can you tell me what is that? Very good. Now, can you tell me what is Zika? Very good. Then, in which countries wars and battles are still taking place? Can you remember? Very good. Then, what is the unit of mortality rate? We have just discussed it under the answering RQs, right? And we have also discussed it in a very beginning of our today's class. So, can you tell me what is the unit of mortality rate? You are absolutely right. Then, tell me 2 causes of discrepancy in mortality rate. We have learned many causes that can create discrepancy in mortality rate. You may answer any 2 of them. Brilliant! I can see you have done a very good job to listen to my class. Keep up the good work. But for those who haven't answered or who couldn't answer, I have written the answer here. First of all, about the definition of death. Death is the end of a life. So, the answer will be the end of a life is death. Then, what is Zika? Zika is nothing but virus, remember? In which countries wars and battles are still taking place? We have learned Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asian countries, there wars and battles are still taking place. And what is the unit of calculating mortality rate? It will be per thousand. You may answer 1000 as well. Both are correct. Then, tell me 2 causes of discrepancy in mortality rate. I have written here poverty and virus and diseases. You may write other causes of discrepancy that can create mortality rate discrepancy. Your answer may also be correct. So, this was all about our today's class. Now, the time for giving homework. I have given 5 RQs already. So, you have to learn all the RQs for your homework. That is why the homework is learn all RQs.
So students, that's all for today's class. I hope all of you have understood what we have learned in our today's class. But one thing I want to warn you before finishing our class, and that is, don't forget to do your homework and don't forget to learn your lesson every day. With this, I'm ending the class. Thank you for staying with me.